Hi, welcome to my tutorial on using AngularJS with WebPack to create single-page applications easily while leveraging the power of TypeScript. We will be using WebPack, Bootstrap, FontAwesome, and of course AngularJS for this application. We will even sprinkle in some UI router so we can leverage the power of state-based routes while creating our single-page application. The first step we need to do is install the necessary tools. The first tool you will need is a good code editor. What code editor to use is really up to you, but I will be using WebStorm during this tutorial. WebStorm can be found by going to www.jetbrains.com/WebStorm. You can use Sublime Code or even Notepad if you want as an editor. All of the building will be the building and compiling of our program will be done from the command line. So what code editor you choose is really up to you. But I will be using some shortcuts that are available only in WebStorm, so you may or may not be able to follow along in those cases. And I'll point those out when the time comes. If you want to go ahead and install WebStorm you don't have already installed, you can download a free 30-day trial by clicking this download button here on the website that you have gone to at WebStorm. Once you've downloaded, installed, and you're ready to go with your IDE, the next thing you're going to want to do, or code editor, whatever you want to use, the next thing you're going to want to do is install Node.js. So you can find that at https://nodejs.org. Once you come here, you'll see that there's actually two buttons. So the one you're going to want to choose is the one for current. Your version may be different depending on what time you're watching this video. So at this time it's version 8.4. So just go ahead and click that current button, download it, and while it's downloading you might want to go ahead and pause the video, and once it's downloaded you can go ahead and launch the installer and resume the video at that time. Okay, so once you have the Node.js setup installer running, you're going to want to choose all of the defaults. Just go ahead and click next all the way through here. You'll have to accept the licensing agreement, of course. Just click next. Go ahead and click next, accept program files or wherever it happens to suggest on your machine. Click next and allow all of these choices to be the default and click next. At that point you'll be at the install screen. Once here you may want to pause the video as this could take a while and go ahead and click the install button. And once it's done installing, you can go ahead and resume the video at that time. Okay, now you're going to want to launch the Node.js command prompt. You can find that in the installation location where you've installed Node.js on your machine, in your particular environment and operating system. But once you've done that, you've launched Node.js command prompt. You can start your project from any directory. Right now I'm just going to go ahead and start it from this projects directory I've created. Again, where you start the project really doesn't matter, just you'll have to remember the path later on. So go ahead and we'll make the directory now. We're going to call it my Angular TypeScript app. I can call TypeScript, right? And we're going to go ahead and change directory into that directory. Now we will utilize the Node Package Manager to initialize our project and create a package.json file for us. And we'll do that by typing npm init at the command prompt. And you'll choose all the defaults here except for the one called entry point. At the entry point, you're going to want to instead type webpack.config.js and go ahead and choose all the other defaults after. Once you're at this directory, once you're with your project initialized, you can go ahead and list directory, and you'll see that there's a package.json created for us. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is install our requirements that we're going to need, and we will be using again Node Package Manager for that, but we will be using the install command rather than the init command. And the first requirement we're going to install is WebPack. So we will type npm install --save-dev. That command, that option basically tells npm to add it to our dev dependencies section in our package.json, which is convenient if we ever clone a repository later and we want to run npm install. That will bring all of our dependencies in for us automatically. We won't have to remember it later. So go ahead and type that, and we're going to type WebPack, and you go ahead and press enter at that point. And that may take a while on your machine, so depending on how fast your machine is, you may want to pause and resume the video. Now that we have WebPack installed, we are going to want to install our TypeScript and less compiler. So again, we're going to use the same command, npm install --save-dev, and we're going to type TypeScript and less. We're going to use less for our styling, just because it's much easier to make changes with your variables, and just less is just better than CSS, in my opinion. Now, once you've got those installed, the next thing you're going to want to do is install some loaders. So we've got several loaders that we're going to want to install. And again, we're going to start with the npm install --save-dev command, exactly like the other two previous. And we're going to install the CSS loader, the file loader, the HTML loader, the less loader, the style loader, the TS loader, and the URL loader. These loaders I'll explain later on in the Webpack, but they basically allow Webpack to do its job. So we'll go ahead and install those, and once that is done, the next thing we're going to want to take a look at after installing the compilers, rather the loaders, is our type definitions. Since we're using TypeScript, we're going to need various type definitions. Fortunately, we have those in the regular npm repositories, and those are going to be that all of them are prefixed with @types in this particular repository. Angular @types, Angular resource @types, Angular UI Bootstrap, I'm sorry, we don't want Angular resource. We want @types \Angular, @types \Angular UI Bootstrap, and @types \Angular UI Router. Those are the types we're going to want to install. I'm sorry, there's one more. Node. That one's important. Oops. I have a typo here on my install. Okay, now once that's done, we're going to want to install our regular dependencies, which we will leave off the -dev. In that case, we'll just do --save. And for that, we're going to want Angular UI Bootstrap, font awesome, and UI router AngularJS. That'll allow us to have our Angular routes. I'm sorry, I have a typo here. And go ahead and run that. Okay, now let's go ahead and open the project in WebStorm. You can do that by launching WebStorm and choosing Open Project and navigating to the folder we just created. You can see here I have it opened, and go ahead and expand that. We'll take a look at our package.json, and it should look exactly like this. If you have anything missing out here, make sure you go back and install it with a --save dev for the dev dependencies, or --save for the regular dependencies, just so you have if you need to clone it later, you won't run into any problems. So once you've done that, we're going to want to create a tsconfig.json file. WebStorm has a built-in template for that, but we're not going to use that one. We're actually going to use our own, and I'll go over the relevant parts. The module is we're going to use CommonJS, which is pretty typical, and another one that's really important is we're going to be generating source maps, so be able to debug easily in the browser. And go ahead and save that. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a webpack.config.js file, which is our entry point. So webpack. Oh, sorry. Okay. And I'm going to copy and paste, but I'll go over the relevant parts. So we're going to require path because we're going to use it down here. Context is basically wherever entry point is relational to, that's where this is. So we're going to say a current directory source. We'll create that source directory later. Entry, that is where Webpack is going to start its entry point. That's where it's going to start its scaffolding. And again, this is relational to source here, or actually into context here. And then our output, which is where we're going to end up with our compiled result, is going to be the path is going to be a dist folder, which it will create when it compiles it, and a file name is going to be called bundle.js. This will be important later. We'll see where that is. And resolve, this is just kind of a convenient, so we don't have to type the extension on the end of each of the file names when we want to do a require, and so that kind of gives us a little time saver there. So module is where we're going to set our loaders. So these are our loaders that I was talking about when we were installing it with npm install. So the first one is our TypeScript loader, which is called a TS loader, and that's going to look for any files with the .ts extension. Next thing we're going to have is an HTML loader, and we'll see that later on where we're going to use that for templates in our views, but this is really cool, so we can require actual HTML files, and they'll be compiled and in line within the actual bundle.js. And of course our less compiler, so rather our less loader, our CSS loader, and our style loader. And those will allow us to load any less files through the less loader and then through the CSS loader and style loader. And then this one just allows us to kind of load some specific file types. This is basically used for the font awesome. This allows us to use font awesome and do some require with that. Bring those files in, kind of cool. So go ahead and save that. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to do is create an index.html file. So we will start here, and again I'm going to copy and paste, but I'm going to go over the relevant parts. And the first part is our ng app, which we will create later, coming up here in a bit. And then our UI view directive, where we will inject our view here for our single page app. And then finally down here, this is where we're going to include the actual generated bundled JavaScript file from Webpack. And again, so this is the dist, this is the folder here called path, and then the file name bundle was referenced here. So any changes into here, well, you have to make sure that you reflect those changes here. So once that's created, go ahead and save that. And then we're going to create a source folder off of the root folder. And we're going to add an app.ts file. Okay. And then we are also going to add a less folder for our styles, and we're going to add a main.less file here. And we are going to copy and paste again, but go over the parts. So we're going to import. Now what this tilde does is it basically tells Webpack to resolve it within our node modules folder. And so that's kind of cool, allows us to do that. And if we come down here, we can probably verify that we do have the less bootstrap less here. And we don't have to specify the .less again because we added that resolve in the webpack.config right here. So let me close some of these here. I don't need that. Okay, so we have our less file. So in our app file, our app.ts, this is our main scaffolding. So the first thing we're going to want to do is bring in Angular. So we'll require Angular. And then we're going to want to require a couple other things. So we're going to want the UI router. Oops. Spelt it wrong. Is that right? Yep. And then we're going to want Angular UI Bootstrap. And then we're going to want to require in our scaffolding for our less. That'll bring in all our styles. Now, you could do this, you know, through a component, or at this point we're just going to bring it in the application. This will be our global styles, if you will. And so, since we're going to be using a single page application, we're going to need some routes. So let's go ahead and create a new TypeScript file called routes.ts. And within routes, first thing we're going to want to do is export a default class called routes. And with TypeScript, your $inject now becomes an array of strings, and it's a static array of strings, so you specify it this way. And so we are going to expect to inject location provider, state provider. These are all pretty boilerplate for any single page application using UI router, URL router provider. Okay. Now we're going to create our constructor, and we are injecting a location provider, which will be of type ng-location provider, and we will be injecting a state provider, which will be of type iState provider. Oops. And finally, the URL router provider, which is of type Angular UI URL router provider. And the first thing don't worry about the squiggles, they'll get resolved later. First thing we're going to want to do is set our HTML5 mode, and we are going to want to enable that. And we are not going to require a base. Again, this is all boilerplate code pretty much. Remove the hash prefix. And then we're going to provide our default route. We're just going to default to the root for now. Just make it easy. And then finally we're going to create our first state. So state provider dot state, and we're going to call it a home state, and it is of type ng-ui.iState, and the URL will be the root URL, the template. Okay, this is where we're going to need to go ahead and jump out for a minute and create some more things. So let's go ahead. Before we do that, I want to get rid of the squiggles. They bother me. So we're going to go to Tool Windows, hit Alt F12, or go to the terminal, or navigate through View, and open up a terminal window and run npm start. And everything should look good, but did we? Oh, I forgot to add the start. I forgot to go over that part. So go ahead and open up your package.json, and in your scripts section, add a start script, and it's going to be webpack-w. Now you could use Webpack server, Webpack dev server here if you want, but I'm just going to watch in one using Webpack Watcher, and then I'm going to use HTTP server to serve up. So I'll just basically having two processes, one process that watches and builds, another process that serves. So go ahead and save that, and now we should be able to run npm start. And hopefully we should get no errors. Okay, something's wrong. Okay, that was kind of a weird one. So I basically had to import it into the app.ts file to get rid of that error. So go ahead and do an import routes from /routes. Again, we don't need the ts. Press enter, and then we should get successful build. Yeah, we did. That was weird. Okay, and then we open this up. That should go away. All right. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create a directory for our views, because we're going to want to reference a view here in our state provider. And we're going to create a new directory within our views called home. So create a directory in source called views, and within views create a directory called home. And within home we will create an index.html file. And get rid of all of that. And our home is going to be really simple. So I'm going to use a cool tool that I like to use called Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. And so I'm going to type container.container.row.call md12. Press tab. And that should open all of that up for us. And we're just going to do a simple message here. We're going to reference vm.message. So, of course, we don't have a VM yet, but we'll get to that. So, next thing we're going to want to do is inside of our routes file, come back here, and under our URL, we're going to type, we're now going to bring in our template. Now, don't do template URL, do template. That actually brings in the view itself. And require, again, you don't need a .html because we added the resolve. And then we're going to reference a controller, which we haven't created yet, but we'll get to that again after this. And we're going to do a controller as VM. Okay, so that should do it for our state. Our state is now complete. And next thing we're going to want to do is create a folder called controllers. And within controllers, we're going to want to create a directory called home controller. And with home controller, we're going to add a index.ts. And controllers are nothing special in the land of TypeScript. So we're just going to export a default class called home controller. Oops. And we are going to have a single message, which would be a type string. And our inject is empty. Nothing to inject. And we will say this dot message goes hello world from home controller. Okay, so that should be it for that. And let's go back to our app.ts file, and we can start wrapping everything up now. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a modular. So we're going to do angular.module, and we're going to call this TypeScript app. Again, that's referenced in this index file here, right there. And in this module, we're going to want to create a controller called home controller. And we're going to want to, before we do that, we're going to want to import home controller from controllers home controller. Since it's index.ts, we don't need to specify it. It automatically loads from WebPack, and we're going to use that right here in our home controller. Inject that in there, and then finally we want to configure our routes. So we're going to go ahead and type config routes right there. So that should do it for our app.ts. Let's look at our routes again. So just to go over everything, we enabled the HTML mode. We got rid of the hash prefix. If it's an unrecognized state, it will default to the root state. The root state is called home, and we brought in the template using require and our HTML loader. That's where the HTML loader comes in handy. So we brought in our view, and we specified the home controller and controller as VM there. And our home controller is just a regular TypeScript class, and our view can reference any property in that TypeScript class, like a regular JavaScript class. So we have a successful build here. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new terminal. And if you don't have a HTTP server already installed, you can install that by typing npm install http server-g as shown here. Make sure you are running as an admin, or if you're using Linux, you use sudo before you do that. Otherwise that -g might cause you some problems, but that's the tool I'm going to be using here. So HTTP server, it's running on 8081. This thing's kind of cool. It actually kind of figures out what servers are in use, and it grabs the first one it can find. So 8081 is the first one. So let me go ahead and launch the app now. Okay, I went ahead and ran the app, and you'll see there are some errors, and I wanted to point out what those errors are, so you don't make the same mistake, and if you're following along. So you'll see the problem is I misspelled TypeScript here. I kept doing that for some reason, but there we go. Now it's actually spelled correctly. And once we save this, then we see that we had a proper load. And if we then come back to our application, oh, we still have an error. Oh, let me check. Alright folks, I'm really sorry about this. So the next thing I forgot, we do have to specify the dependencies in the module. So go ahead and go up to the module next to the module name and type a comma and empty array. And within that array we're going to type router, UI.bootstrap, and finally ng resource. Actually, no, we're not using ng resource in this one. So just those two, UI.router and UI.bootstrap. Just add those inside that array. Go ahead and save. And finally, again, we have another problem. Oh, I think again we have a misspelling. Okay, I'm really on a roll tonight. So home controller here should be home controller. I misspelled that inside of our routes file. So go ahead and make that change. And once we've done that, you can save, refresh, and finally we have success, and we see that we're actually seeing our message come in. So that pretty much wraps it up for using TypeScript, AngularJS, and WebPack to create some awesome single-page applications. In a follow-up video, I will show you how you can utilize and leverage the power of UI Bootstrap. And then in a third video, I will try to show you how you can use ng-resource and to create some really cool RESTful factories for usage in your application. Okay, and thank you again for watching my video, and I hope to see you soon. If you have any problems with the installation, or if you have any other questions, go ahead and leave comments below, and I will try to get back to you. Thank you again.